Let's jump in. Now, you are not the first company to announce a virtual first, workspace, not the first tech company. However, your move is significant simply because of how much office space Dropbox has. You guys signed the largest office space lease in San Francisco history just a few years ago, more than 700,000 square feet for 15 years. So walk us through this decision, how you got there, and what you do now with all of this commercial space.
Sure. Well, I don't think anyone could have imagined how the entire world went to working from home overnight, right, in the most dramatic and abrupt way possible. But we see the shift to distributed work is going to continue beyond when lockdown ends. And what's interesting is the vast majority of our employees have said that they don't want to return to the way things were before. Like, they don't want to lose the flexibility. They don't want to go back to commuting. And we've seen this with a lot of companies. And so we saw this as a unique opportunity to reinvent how we work and rethink this completely. And it's a little different from remote only or some of the other approaches. So we thought about how do we combine the best elements of the remote and in-person experience, and we call our approach virtual first. So most focused and solo work happens at home, and then in-person collaboration is still critical for building teams and relationships and culture. So we're turning our offices into collaborative spaces we call Dropbox Studios. And we think this is, again, better than going fully remote or just sort of letting people figure it out for themselves. Because fully remote kind of cuts out the in-person experience, which we think is critical to work. And a lot of the hybrid models and saying that just work from home whenever you want to, we think risks kind of a worst of both worlds situation where you don't get the sense of community in an office and you don't get the same level of flexibility.
Right. The Zoom fatigue or burnout is real, Drew. It's important to note that this is kind of a hybrid model because you do have those new Dropbox studios, these flexible workspaces. But again, what do you do with all of the real estate that you guys have taken on over the last few years? There was a San Francisco Business Times piece this morning saying that you guys have put up more than a third of your office space in San Francisco for sublease. Is that correct?
So, yeah, it's a transition. I mean, over time, we're not going to need as much physical space. I mean, that's part of the explicit design here. But we think, and sure, there's some efficiencies on costs that result from that or result from being able to hire in lower cost locations or allowing employees to live in lower cost locations. But I think you need to solve for more than just cost. So the primary factor for us is, first, again, the vast majority of our team wanted to preserve a lot of the benefits they were getting from working from home. Now, there are a lot of issues with remote work that we can also talk about. But most importantly, our customers the world has shifted to working in a distributed way. And we see this as massively increasing our opportunity because there's all these pain points and ways that we can improve the remote working experience. But I feel as a company, we can only do that. We can only live out our mission if we're on the leading edge of how we work ourselves.
Drew, shifting gears, I want to turn back to the news of the day, which has to do with the throttling of distribution of this New York Post story on both Twitter and Facebook. You're on the Facebook board. Are you going to talk to or have you talked to Mark Zuckerberg about information distribution policy? Do you view that as part of your role?
So being on the board, I can't get into the specifics, but
I didn't ask specifics.
Certainly, yeah. No, well, I can absolutely say that Mark and Cheryl on the board are very focused on striking the right balance on these kinds of issues.
And so you're saying you do think it is part of your role to weigh in on how the algorithm works in cases like this and whether the distribution policy is valid?
Certainly, figuring out how do we strike the right balance on these issues is something we discuss with the board, absolutely. And it's something that I know.
Drew, I know that you're fairly close with Mark Zuckerberg as well, and they also announced sort of a similar policy and that they would be more flexible in allowing their employees to work from home for longer. Is this something that you discussed with him and other entrepreneurs, CEOs in the tech space?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's an exciting time, right? There's no playbook for this, and my sense is that a lot of folks haven't really gotten to the next level of specifics.
Shepard Smith here. Thanks for watching CNBC on YouTube.